الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
What you're listening to is the sound of the muezzin, the call to prayer. The muezzin is the person who calls to prayer. And Muslims all over the world hear this 5 times a day. When you're in the Middle East, it echoes throughout the land. It booms. They play it from very loud. They play it from very loud speakers, and no matter where you are, you can hear that call to prayer. God is great. God is great. I bear witness that there is no God except the one God. I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Muhammad Rasul Allah. Muhammad is the messenger of God. And this prayer, this call to prayer, is one of the 5 main pillars of Islam. It's proclaiming that there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. That constitutes the first pillar of Islam, or called the Shahada. Then Muslims all over the world hear that, and they know it's time to pray. And they get on their prayer rugs, and they kneel and face the Kaaba in Mecca. They face east because they happen to be here in America. In the United States, you face east. If you're in India, you're obviously not going to face east. If you're in wherever, Pakistan, you're not going to face east. But when you're in the United States, you face east. You're facing toward the Kaaba, this black cube that's in Mecca, and what is now Saudi Arabia. The third pillar of Islam we call zakat. That is giving alms to the poor and tending to the needs of the poor. The fourth pillar of Islam is the month of Ramadan, when Muslims fast from one way I've heard it is you can distinguish a black thread from a white thread. Once there's enough light to distinguish the 2 colors of thread, you cannot eat or drink or smoke or, engage in bedroom activities. There's nothing. You don't do anything. I mean, you perfectly fast. From the time you can distinguish a black thread and a white thread until evening, when they have the final call to prayer, and then people can eat and break fast, where we get our word breakfast. The fifth pillar of Islam is called Al-Hajj, which is the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca. So Muslims all over the world, if they're able to, if they're sick, if they're poor, then they get a pass. But if they are not sick and they are not poor, then you are expected to make pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca and walk around, circumambulate the Kaaba, the black cube in Mecca, and participate in the Hajj. So that's your 5 pillars of Islam. I just want to, before we get underway here, I would just like to cover some terms that I just want to clarify and just make sure, we're clear about what all these things mean. Arab, Muslim, Islam, all that stuff. So let's go through the terms real quickly. One, well, they're not enumerated, but the first one is Islam is a religion. That's the subject of today's episode. Islam is a religion, just like Catholicism, just like Judaism, just like Hinduism. Islam is a separate monotheistic faith. Another point I'd like to make is that a Muslim is a person who practices Islam. Just like a Christian practices Christianity and a Jew practices Judaism, a Muslim practices the religion of Islam. An Arab is a person, it's an ethnicity. It's not the clearest term in the world, ethnicity, but we've talked about that on the show. Defining what an Arab is can be a little tricky. It's a very general term, I guess. It can apply to just about anyone who speaks Arabic and identifies with the Arab culture. So if you speak Arabic and you kind of view yourself as an Arab, feel you're an Arab, you're an Arab. I got an old friend of mine I met in the Middle East. His name is Alex. I met Alex. I was exiting the Gaza Strip and he was entering the Gaza Strip. And I don't know, he just made an impression on me. And then I bumped into him again, very weird, on a bus leaving Israel going into Jordan. And I was like, I saw him on the bus and I was like, what? That's that guy. That's that guy that I saw all those years ago. So we jumped up a conversation, became friends, blah, blah, blah. So if you, assuming you're like just a white American, if you saw Alex, you would think, okay, that's just some dude from Manchester. That's just a Brit. But when we're in the Middle East, my Arab friends view Alex as an Arab. He speaks fluent Arabic. I believe his father's Arab, lives in Saudi Arabia, and Alex identifies as an Arab, even though most people in the United States, if they saw Alex, they'd be like, oh, that's just some white British dude. No, not to them. To them, he's an Arab, So this can get a little unclear at times. I'm not unclear, but it depends on. It's not. You can't. There's no blood test. It just comes down to if you speak the language and if you identify with the culture. That's it. But that can be a little nebulous, I guess. Also, an Arab or Arab can be an adjective to describe a culture, a kind of music, a kind of cuisine, and so on. Like I say, makloba is an Arab dish, or mensif is an Arab dish. It's an Arab cuisine. Arab is the adjective describing the cuisine, or that's Arab music. That's Arab whatever. Arab the culture. That's Arab. That particular cultural idiosyncrasy or what have you. We would call that. That's Arab. That's Arab. What he's doing is Arab. Okay, so that's an adjective. Arabic is a language. That is the thing that Arabs tend to speak, is Arabic. There are no Arabic people. And I hear even, it's kind of funny, I hear even Arabs make this mistake, which is fine because they're probably native Arabic speakers and English is their second language, and they hear native English speakers make this mistake all the time, so then it just becomes internalized. There are no Arabic people. We wouldn't say so-and-so is Arabic, or that cuisine is Arabic, or that music is Arabic. Arabic is a language like French, like Italian, like Russian. That's it, okay? There are no Arabic people. Another term we should learn is Arabian. Arabian is an old and outdated term. We used to refer to like people from the Middle East, Arab people from the Arab world, as Arabian. We don't really do that anymore. People don't. We wouldn't say that so and so is Arabian. We just say so and so is an Arab. Yeah, Arabian is the use of the term is limited to the peninsula on which Saudi Arabia is located, the Arabian Peninsula, Jazirat al-Arab. That's the Arabic. That means the island of the Arabs, the Arabian Peninsula. That is the Jazirat al-Arab. So we say that the Arabian Peninsula is the geographical entity on which is located Saudi Arabia. Okay, Saudi Arabia is a country. It's a nation state. It's located in Arabia. So we just limit our use of Arabian to that. And I guess Arabian's also a kind of horse. I don't know much about horses because I'm allergic to them. It's true. It's the only thing I'm allergic to. Cats, dogs, dust, pollen, nothing. Just horses. And you might be wondering, how do you know that? Because I learned the hard way. That's all. So, yeah, I was probably 6 years old. I don't know. I don't know, pretty young. I was on a horse with my mom at a horse farm, and I was on the horse, sitting in front of my mom on the horse, and I'm petting the horse and touching my face because that's what kids do. And next thing I know, wow, pink welts. My eyes got swelled and puffy, and yeah, everything. It was not great. And then my parents were like, "Huh, he's allergic to horses," which was no surprise because my father's allergic to horses, and he's really allergic to horses. Like, he can't even look at a picture of a horse without breaking out into welts, and so breathing gets labored and so on and so forth. I'm just good old-fashioned allergic to horses, but he's like crazy allergic to horses. Can't even be downwind from one. I can be in the presence of one, I just can't touch it. Or go into a horse barn or something. I got stories about me in a horse barn fairly recently, but we won't go into that right now. So, those are our terms. We just want to keep those terms straight so we know what we're talking about and not make the common mistakes of calling people Arabic and not understanding the distinction between Muslim and Arab. They're very different. Okay, so, hi Harms Army. I missed you guys. It's been a while. I did a fair amount of prep for this episode. I don't know why, because I know this subject, but I felt like I needed to, I'm looking at the books right now. I felt like I needed to kind of brush up, work on some details. I reread Karen Armstrong's fantastic, and here's the cover of Karen Armstrong's book, her biography on Muhammad. It's just fantastic. She's fantastic. Speaking of Karen Armstrong, she's fantastic. I would recommend anything she's written. Her books are very clear, very nicely written, very well researched, humane, sympathetic. She does outstanding work. Karen Armstrong is a straight up gangster, and I really like her work a lot. And that short biography on the Prophet Muhammad is fantastic. Another biography I would recommend would be W. Montgomery Watt's biography, also short, paperback, a little more scholarly than Karen Armstrong's book, but very much worth reading. And you don't need a PhD to get through it. It's just a skosh more scholarly than Karen Armstrong's isn't really scholarly, I guess. It's just you just read it and it's clear and easy. And Watts is a little more detail oriented, but not terrible. You can get through it. So I would, if you want to dig into the history and learn about the Prophet Muhammad, then I would suggest Armstrong and Watt for sure. That one's it. That's a no-brainer. You're in good hands with both of those historians. Okay. Yeah, I missed you guys. Harm's Army, and oh yeah. Also about the prepping for this episode, I did a fair amount of prep. I reread a chunk of the Quran. Went through Armstrong's book nearly in total. I went through a portion of Watt's biography. Embarrassingly, I read some of my own work on the subject, and yeah. But what I did not do is rehearse any of this. I just want to talk about this thing that I care about. I just want it to be organic and be kind of conversational and just sort of, just talk about it. It's something I care about deeply. It connects to the Arab world, the Arab culture, which is something I hold near and dear. I've spent time in the Middle East. I've eaten at the tables of the very rich and the very poor and everybody in between. And I just like Arab countries. I'm more comfortable in Arab countries. I'm not really a Cancun kind of guy. I'm not really a Florida kind of guy. That's not really my thing. Paper umbrellas in my drink and sitting in a hammock on a beach, not really my thing. It's not my scene. I like Arab countries. If I get on an airplane, which these days I don't really do much anymore, I'm looking at my wheelchair right now. Do you see me glance You see me glance that way? I'm looking at my wheelchair. Yeah, I'm stuck in that thing. I know I'm not supposed to say I'm confined, but I am bloody confined to it. The people who have the luxury and the privilege of worrying about language that's going to wound me probably are able-bodied and don't have these issues. I'm probably not confined to wheelchairs. I am precisely confined to one. I don't use a wheelchair because I just think it's fun. I didn't buy one because I was bored. Having to have a wheelchair is I want to put this carefully and delicately. Having to use a wheelchair is bullshit. I'd rather not have to use one. I'd rather just go to the airport, get on an airplane, go run around the Middle East, and I mean literally run around the Middle East and walk around and climb on stuff and go upstairs and not have to have a problem with or an issue with getting from place to place. That's where I'd probably be right now, come to think of it. I wouldn't even be talking to you. Probably be in the Middle East. Doing what? I don't know. I'll probably be there though. So yeah. So we're just gonna talk about Islam and talk about the Arab world, and that's what we're gonna do. So I want to start with where we're talking about and when we're talking about. So let's back up maybe, I don't know, 100 or a couple hundred years before the Prophet Muhammad shows up. We're in the Arabian Peninsula, what is now Saudi Arabia, or mostly Saudi Arabia. There's a few more countries on that peninsula, but mostly Saudi Arabia. We're in the desert. We are in a small town at the time, small town called Mecca. And Mecca didn't become the huge thing that it became, but at the time, a couple centuries prior to Muhammad showing up, it was a pretty small town, and we're in the desert. And who are we talking about? We're talking about the Bedouin, typically. There are two types of Arabs living in that area at the time. There are the more pastoralists, the more sedentary people living in the west edge of the peninsula. Then there are the Bedouin. So you get the sedentary crowd, and then you got the nomadic traveling around the desert from oasis to oasis. You got that crowd. Okay, so it's a punishing, hot place to live, even if you're sedentary and living, planting crops and living in the west coast. It's still hot and intense, and it's definitely intense and hot for the Bedouin. The Bedouin travel throughout the desert. Water is clearly an issue. That's a matter of life or death. They domesticated the one-humped dromedary camel, and it was sort of a godsend, this camel, because the camel could travel great distances on very little water. Their padded feet allowed them to walk across the hot sand, and this became basically the center of Bedouin life, the one-humped dromedary camel. They ate the camel. They used the skins and fur for tents. They used the urine as a hair tonic. They used the dung for starting fires and for maintaining fires in the desert. I'm missing one. Oh, the milk. They drank the milk. Saved the water for the cattle, if they had cattle. So they got a lot of use out of the camel. They put everything to use. They still eat camel in the Middle East. I recall sitting in the West Bank, in the Palestinian West Bank. I was at a sort of an outdoor cafe thing on the standard white plastic chairs, and I was sitting out on this, patio thing, and about 5 feet from my head, there was a camel head hanging on a hook, and the camel, it was kind of like the camel was looking at me, but it was just the head of the camel, and on a hook, and it was a weird way to eat lunch, but when you're in the Middle East, you get used to these things. And it's like, oh, there's a camel head on a hook. Cool. All right, so we're in the desert, the Bedouin, the sedentary pastoralists. That's your setup. Okay, Mecca at the time was not a particularly developed place, just a town, and not that big of a deal. It would eventually become a big deal. So then Mecca does become a big deal and becomes a trading hub. And there are itinerant merchants traveling to Syria, going into Damascus, trading their wares, and Mecca became a hub, and it started to become a big deal. It started to become a trade, a major city for doing trade. But the trade and the marketization of Mecca at the time ran into this prevailing philosophy called Murwa. Now, Murwa is like the Bedouin code of conduct. It's like bravery and integrity and courage and so on. It becomes a philosophy, a life philosophy. It becomes a code that people living in the desert adhered to, and a sense of honor and generosity toward fellow clansmen or tribesmen, people in need. And this got pretty intense. I mean, it got to the point where the generosity almost turned into arrogance, where you might blow everything you'd saved up, all your money, all your, whatever, you blow it all in a night just to dazzle your friends with your generosity. So you'd throw a banquet, you'd have a party, and then you might go broke in the result. So the next thing you know, someone's being generous to you. So this is Murwa, and that starts to change in Mecca at the time. People start to become more self-centered. People became greedy. People became, well, it's what markets do to people, do to societies, is, people become greedy, materialistic, and self-centered, right? So that's a little picture of what Mecca's turning into at that time. And then you got the arrival of this very special young man. His name is Muhammad. Okay? The Muslims don't worship Muhammad. The Muslims view Muhammad as a man, as a mortal, just a messenger of God. A Rasul is the word messenger. That's Muhammad. That's what he was. He's not worshipped. He's revered as a prophet, but he's not worshipped. And if you, we'll get to this, but if you look at the Quran, if you read the Quran, you see a lot of familiar names. You see the names of, Adam and Moses and Abraham and Jesus and Mary and Lot and Job, and there's a whole list of people from the Bible that get mentioned in the Quran, and they're viewed as the people of the book. They're revered, but the Prophet Muhammad is viewed as the seal of the prophets. So he's not a god. He's not the physical instantiation of God. He's not like what Christ became later, viewed as like the physical God in human form kind of thing. He was not viewed like that. Christ is not viewed like that. Christ is viewed as a prophet. The Quran makes it very clear that Christ is not God. The Quran's very clear about that, and it says it repeatedly. And that only became Christian dogma centuries later. There's nothing in the Bible that says that Christ is God. I mean, he talks about being the Son of God and so on. He says some things that are sort of close, but there's nowhere in the Bible that says Christ is God in human form. There's nowhere in the Bible that says that. And the Muslims do not believe that. So the Prophet Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. He's the last in that lineage. If we trace Adam, Moses, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, the Nazarene, Muhammad is the last in the lineage, the seal of the prophets. And that's how he's viewed. They're all viewed the same way. Muhammad, Christ, Moses, they're all men, they're all mortals, they were all mortals, and they're all prophets sent by God to deliver a certain message. Muhammad was just a man. He lived, he was a member of his family was a member of the Hashim clan. And if you look at the current Jordanian royalty, they claim to be, well, they are Hashemites. Okay, Hashemite, it refers to the clan that Muhammad belonged to. They're Hashemites. Muhammad was a Hashemite. And they were one of the biggest clans in the tribe of the Quraysh. The Quraysh were the ruling tribe in that part of Arabia. You could think of tribe and clan as genus and species, like fruit, banana, furniture, chair, or something. So general and particular. So the tribes are larger, the clans are smaller. So Muhammad was a member of the Hashim clan. Muhammad was born, he was in the care of his mother. His father died before he was born, and then he was under the care of his grandfather. Then his grandfather died. While Muhammad was a young boy, and then he was under the care of his uncle, who was fairly high-ranking in the Hashim clan, Abu Talib. Abu Talib took care of the young Muhammad, in addition to his mother, and then his mother, as was customary at the time, sent him into the desert with the Bedouin tribe. So, not a prophet right at this point, but the young boy lived in the desert, learned the ways of the Bedouin. But he was in a tight spot, Muhammad, because then his mother died, so he was an orphan. His mom's dead, his father's dead, the grandfather died, then he's in the care of his uncle, and he's kind of out on his own, really, and he has a pretty tough go of it. If you were an orphan at this time, you were in a tight spot. It was not very hospitable place for orphans. So the young Muhammad kind of came up swinging, as they say. But he had a remarkable integrity, and became well known as someone who was trustworthy and had a profound moral integrity about him. He was a very impressive young man, and he eventually meets Khadija. Now, he was kind of broke, and opportunities were pretty thin on the ground for orphans, and nevertheless he got involved with one of her trading caravans, and she took particular note of his integrity as a person, as a man, and she eventually proposed marriage to him. He was 25 years old, she was 15 years his senior, and she asked to marry him. And no, that was not customary. Nevertheless, they got married. She bore him 6 children, 4 daughters, and 2 sons that died in infancy, but the 4 daughters lived on. And Muhammad would take no other wives during his marriage to Khadija, which is extraordinary. He thought very well of her, and he irked a number of future wives because he would talk about how wonderful she was, and they didn't want to hear it. So they didn't want to hear how wonderful she was, so yeah, they got a little peeved with him, but so it goes. So one day, The Prophet Muhammad, no, he's not a prophet. This is out of habit, I call him the Prophet Muhammad, but he wasn't a prophet at this time. He was in a cave in Al-Hira, which is which is a cave near Mecca, and he was in a cave meditating. Now you got to bear in mind that Muhammad was, he was dismayed. He was unsettled. He was unsettled with how Mecca was becoming this city of greed and self-centeredness and materialism and so on and so forth. He didn't care for that. He didn't like that. That bothered him. So he took to meditating in a cave and thinking about how society could be improved and so on. How the leadership, how the management of Mecca could be improved, because he found this to be disturbing. And it was at this time, while he was meditating in the cave, that he felt a presence. This was a very unpleasant experience for him. He felt like he was having the life squeezed out of him. There was a bells ringing in his ears. It was a very intense, very physically unpleasant experience. And so he ran home to Khadija. And he was freaked out. And she calmed him down and covered him with a coat and attempted to assuage his fears and concerns. But she got the feeling that God had contacted him. So she went to, I think it was a cousin of Muhammad, Waraka, which means, warak is a sheet of paper. Excuse me. I don't know what that was, hiccups, or I don't know what's going on there. She contacted Waraka, and Waraka knew the Hebrew Bible pretty much backwards and forwards. He knew Judaism, he knew Christianity, because at the time there were Jews and Christians floating around Mecca. So the people living there at that time, they weren't strangers to Christianity and Judaism, and they were all over the place, Jews and Christians. Furthermore, it should be pointed out that these were Arabs. When we say that there were Jews and Christians living in and around Mecca at the time, say the 6th century, Muhammad was born in I should have mentioned that. Muhammad was born in 570 AD. So we're talking about the 6th century here. Islam is, as far as the monotheistic faiths, is sort of the new guy. We're talking about the 6th century AD, and any Jews or Christians that were running around spoke Arabic and looked like Arabs. If you saw Jews and Christians at that time, you would just think, oh, those are Bedouin Arabs, because they all look the same. I mean, they all dress the same, spoke the same language, and culturally, negligible differences, if any, except for the religious, orientation. So, Waraka knew his Bible backward and forward, and he felt that the Prophet Muhammad, see, I'm doing it again, Muhammad had been contacted by God. So you could make an argument that Khadija was the first Muslim and Waraka was the second. But the first Muslim was a woman, because it was her that viewed Muhammad as a prophet, as someone who had been contacted by God and who was sent to deliver God's message. So, You could say that the first Muslim was a woman, which is very interesting considering how women kind of take a back seat in the Middle East and the Arab world typically. Yeah, the first Muslim was a woman. I don't know if that's a controversial thing to say or not. It's certainly in the literature, certainly in the history. It's historically not a controversial thing at all. So, Muhammad returns to the cave and received further revelations. And he concludes eventually that it's not God, because he saw a vision on the horizon, this image of a person, and then the person, like, I think it's the two bow and arrow shots away, went from the size of the horizon, just huge, down to like a normal, maybe normalish sized person. And Muhammad concluded that Muhammad eventually concludes that this is not God, because you're not supposed to see God. So he concludes that this is the Archangel Gabriel. And the Archangel Gabriel contacted Muhammad a number of times over the years and revealed to him the Word of God. So it's the Archangel Gabriel speaking to Muhammad, telling Muhammad what God has to say about Arabs, about the Bedouin, about the state of Mecca, about everything. So this is you have to keep this in the context of 6th century Arabia. This is the Word of God, and so even in Muhammad's time, and then decades after, these revelations, which Muhammad and company committed to memory, were then written down and recorded, and that is the holy book of the Quran. It's the message of God revealed to now the Prophet Muhammad, through the Archangel Gabriel, who functions as an intermediary. That's where we get the Quran. The Quran means recite, and that is the first thing that the Archangel Gabriel said to Muhammad: recite. And then he recited the words of God, where man came from, and so on and so forth. So that's where we get the Quran. And the Quran was again recorded and written down, mostly decades after the Prophet Muhammad. So Muhammad cultivates a small following, and then he cultivated a bigger following. Then he took on the leadership in Mecca, and then he became wholly unwelcome in Mecca. He kind of wore out his welcome, because people who are after wealth and power and greed and so on, they don't want to hear about this stuff, because the Prophet Muhammad was a reformer. And I want to make that point emphatic. I want to really hit that on the head. The Prophet Muhammad was a reformer. He was disgusted with the leadership in Mecca. He was disgusted with the ravenous greed and materialism of that city, and he preached a message of the Golden Rule. He preached a message of caring for orphans, caring for the poor, caring for women. He was a reformer, and a very forward-thinking one at that. Then he would eventually cultivate an enormous following. And then fast forward to the present, there are 1 billion Muslims in the world. It's extraordinary. A documentary, it wasn't the BBC documentary, I think it was PBS. It was a documentary on Muhammad and the Arab Empire. I won't go into the history of the Arab Empire, but there's a historian who made a comment which I really liked. He said, if we were to rank the top influential leaders of the world. If we were to rank the top 10, the Prophet Muhammad would be in the top 3. That's pretty good. I like that. That's true. I mean, I think it's true. The Prophet Muhammad did cultivate an enormous following even in his own lifetime, and then his, Muslims would go and preach his word and preach God's word and preach the Quran to millions of people and formed an empire, and not a real nasty empire where they would put people to the sword for not converting to Islam. There is no compulsion in religion. It's clear in the Quran. This notion of Muslims, putting to the sword people who won't become Muslims, that doesn't exist in the Quran. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. The Arab Empire was a pretty tolerant empire as far as empires go, and as the legendary historian Philip K. Heaty said, they sat at the feet of the conquered. There's something to that effect. They sat at the feet of the conquered. They wanted to learn from the conquered. They wanted to learn from these different people. There were very impressive things going on in the Arab world at the time, and the Arabs wanted to learn from it. They wanted to learn about astronomy. They wanted to learn about mathematics. It was the Arabs who preserved the scrolls of Plato. That's the reason we have so much Plato, the complete works of Plato. We can thank the Arabs for that. They preserved those scrolls. They translated those scrolls, and then eventually they were transmitted into Europe much later. It was like the 14th century, 15th century, 1400. But yeah, the Arabs learned a lot from all the lands they conquered, because the Arabs were doing mind-blowing things at the time. This was also at the time that Western Europe was kind of a undeveloped backwater. This is after the Roman Empire. This is the Western Europe is like nothing. I mean, it's not nothing. It's not fair, but the genius of Arab culture is extraordinary. And there certainly wasn't a whole lot of genius floating around in Western Europe at the time. Fast forward, past the fall of the Roman Empire. One thing I should mention, I've already mentioned that the Prophet Muhammad is not revered. He's revered. He's not worshipped. He is precisely revered. He is not worshipped as the Son of God or the physical instantiation of God or physical iteration of God. He's merely a prophet and the seal of the prophets. Now that I mentioned that, but the one thing I want to mention is that when you enter a mosque, which I incidentally have never done, I've been around many mosques, but I feel I don't belong in a mosque, and therefore I don't go into them. I've been at the doorway of God knows how many. I just don't go into them out of respect. I don't feel I have any business there, and I think Arabs who are praying, they can do so without having to look at someone that looks like me. So I don't go into them. I have been into a couple of mosques that were being built. So I've been on the construction site of a few. One in Jerusalem, one in Palestinian West Bank. Is there anything? I think those are just the two. So I've technically been in a mosque, but not a bit. But they were being built. So I feel like I could go in there because it's still a construction site and there's wheelbarrows and stuff and shovels. So whatever. I've also been on the construction site of a hospital. I was on the roof. That was a bit nail bitey. That was a bit. Whew, it's really up there. And when you walk to the edge, that's the edge. And I didn't get too close to the edge, but yeah, I was in South Feet, Salfit is a small town on the West Bank, the Palestinian West Bank. They're building a hospital, and I went up on the top floor. What I was doing up there, I have no idea, but it was interesting. Anyway, I digress. If you look in a mosque, you won't see statues. You won't see iconography. You won't see things to bow down before. You won't see anything like that. They're pretty sparse. They're pretty Spartan. They're unadorned. They're beautiful, and some of them are friggin' huge. I mean, you can fly a helicopter, and in some of these things. The one in Beirut is. Here's some photos. I got one. Okay, this first photo is really pretty. I didn't take it. This is in. I think it's in Abu Dhabi. It's a beautiful picture, a beautiful mosque. It just gives you a size of the scale to some of these things. They're enormous. The next two photos, it's a picture I took in Jordan. Some women standing outside of the mosque in the city center, what's called the Wasat Medina. In the city center, this is down from the Arab Bank. I can't remember, think of that main street now. It bothers me. So it's a pretty big mosque. Then there's the Beirut one. The Beirut one is ginormous. It's a really big mosque. I took that picture too. These pictures aren't as cool as the one in Abu Dhabi, but I took them, and they're mine. And I don't know why I just adopted that tone. That makes no sense. Whatever. They're rubbish photos, but they give you an idea as to what's going on with the mosques. Okay, so they're unadorned. They're they're beautiful. They're enormous. You could play frisbee in one, and even the small ones you could play frisbee. Not that I'm advocating someone do that, but you get the idea. They're just huge, and they're beautiful, and they got like really lush, beautiful carpet in them, and so on. But you won't see statues or iconography. None of it. You won't see any of it, because the idea is that when you enter the mosque and you get on your knees and you prostrate yourself before God and pray to God, you focus on God. You don't focus on statuary, or you don't focus on iconography or something like that, or stained glass windows, or crucifixes, or whatever. Not that they would have crucifixes, but you get the idea. The visual components of, say, a church, you don't see that stuff in the mosque. The mosque is, like I said, it's relatively unadorned. They're beautiful, but they're unadorned, and there isn't that stuff. So when it comes to the Prophet Muhammad, the Muslims are very, very careful about how they depict or present the Prophet Muhammad. Now here's an image, very old image, by an Arab artist, and you'll notice that the Prophet Muhammad, his face is concealed by a veil. He is not allowed to be depicted as a man, as just like some guy with a beard or whatever. His face is always concealed. If you see the Prophet Muhammad in works of art such as this one, his identity is obscured. He's not depicted in a specific way. There was a controversy regarding a Danish newspaper called the Jyllands-Posten. In 2005, they published a series of editorial, like cartoons and illustrations, depicting the Prophet Muhammad. Many of the cartoons, I remember seeing these, Many of the cartoons were racist and insulting. There was one. I thought there was one. I think there's about. I can't remember. It's about a dozen or so illustrations, and there was one in particular I really liked. But I thought the whole thing was insulting and racist and juvenile, and people are like, oh, the Gillen Poston has a right to. Yeah, the Gillen Poston does have a right to do it, but the Gillen Poston, they made a bad choice. They made a racist choice. They made an insulting choice, and shame on the Gillen's Poston. Yeah. No self-respecting parakeet would have the Gillen's Poston lining its cage at the bottom. It was a shameful thing. 2005, and that leads me to another point I'd like to make about Islam and Arab culture in general. I bumped the camera. Okay. You don't need to know that. It's not uncommon for people in the West to take a dim view of Arabs and Islam. And Michael and I talked about that on the last episode, which I really liked. We talked about Orientalism. The violence that you see in the Middle East, a lot of it is the byproduct of foreign manipulation, specifically on the part of Britain, France, and later the United States. The Great Britain, France, and the United States have sponsored some of the worst psychopaths to lord over those countries, and that's why you see a lot of the violence. And then there's the violence that's just directly delivered to the Arab world via, say, the United States. The West has again and again and again just brought down the hammer and rained death and destruction on that part of the world. And yet, you don't hear Americans or Europeans being insulted. Now, we in the West, it's like a freebie, you know. You're not supposed to say you're not supposed to use racist language or whatever toward, various groups. But you can make anti-Arab jokes or anti-Arab comments. Anti-Arab racism seems to be the last acceptable form of racism. And why? Because we deliver the violence to them. They are at the receiving end of our policies. They are at the receiving end of our punishment and our brutality. And when you're in the Middle East, and I highly recommend you go there, I've been there a number of times, and when you look like me, and they know I'm an American, and I don't hide it, I just tell them I'm an American, whatever. Because people ask me that, they're like, do you say you're an American? I'm like, oh, for Christ's sake. Yeah, I tell them I'm an American. And they will walk across, I'm telling you, this happens almost daily. They will walk across a room to come talk to you, to tell you that we don't hate Americans, we hate your government. Now that is astounding, that they differentiate the government from the people, the population. And they're very careful. I mean, I've heard this so many times, I couldn't even tell you how many times I've heard that. We hate the government, we don't hate Americans. They want us to know that. And yet, the West just has a middle finger toward that part of the world, and we're disgusted by the Middle East, and we're like, oh, that place has been Iraq, it's biblical, and everything we say about it's wrong. It's a religion, it's about Islam, it's about the Bible, it's about these ancient blood feuds and so on, and vendettas and so on and so forth. That's all wrong. All of it is 100% inaccurate. And we, like I said, we took a dim view of that part of the world. We looked down on Arab culture. We looked down on Islam. I'll never forget. I was I was hanging out with a bunch of college-aged guys one night. I was in the Palestinian West Bank in a town called Isaiah, and we were just hanging out. They were really nice guys. They were funny as all hell. And one of them, a similar topic came up, and perceptions in the news and so on and so forth. And one of them sticks his posterior out and points to it and says, "See, no tail." They know. They know how they're perceived, and yet they receive it with grace. And they want us to know they don't hate us, they hate hate our governments, which one cannot blame them for hating our governments. I also hate our governments. So they're correct. They're correct in their hatred. These governments are pretty awful. The one in this country is awful. The ones in Western Europe are awful. That is correct. But they want us to know that. They want us to know that they differentiate the two. Yet we do not differentiate the two. We view them all as just being, oh, that place is a mess. It's violent. It's irrational. It's barbaric. It's backward. It's so on and so forth. ... And shame on us, because we're the problem. Yet we take a racist view of them. One couldn't blame them for taking a racist view of us, and yet they don't. I've been treated with tremendous, heartbreaking hospitality in the Arab world. I've eaten at their tables. I've been in their homes. I've spent time with them. Yeah. And I've been treated nothing but well in the Arab Middle East. All the time. I've been to Beirut. I've been to all over Jordan. I've been to Amman, God knows how many times. I've been to Palestinian West Bank. I've lived there. Well, I guess like I said, I lived there for about a month at a crack. I've been to Cairo. I've been all over the Middle East. All over what's called the Levant. That's kind of my beat, is the eastern edge of the Mediterranean. I've been to the Gaza Strip. I'm always treated well. I'm always treated with dignity. I'm always treated with hospitality. It's heartbreaking. It will break your heart if you go there. If you choose to go there. Israel, I could take or leave Israel. I don't really care much about Israel. I don't spend much time in Israel when I'm there. A little bit in Jerusalem. I've been to Tel Aviv for about 5 minutes. I just don't care about Israel. I find the culture not dissimilar to this one. I find the culture arrogant. I find the culture hostile and vicious. And I find that culture to be in support of the worst people in the country to have it. They find the worst people to lead the country. It's not familiar. So yeah, I don't. When I'm in Europe, when I'm in Israel, I just I just can't wait to leave, basically. And then I get into Arab territories, Palestinian territories, Arab countries, and I just breathe easier. I'm just like, oh, I can feel it in my shoulders. I relax. It's always good to be back in an Arab country. Yeah, that will always be the place I go. When I just did it again, I looked at the wheelchair when I get on an airplane. Nickel's worth of free advice. If you go, fly Lufthansa and get the seat next to the door, next to the emergency door. It's got more foot room, more leg room than business class, and it's only like $90 more expensive. Pay 90 extra bucks, sit next to the emergency exit door, and you got more leg room than you do in business class? That's a no-brainer. And I like Lufthansa. It's a pretty decent airline. Yeah. So there you go. So I want to look at the numbers. Now, I do apologize for my pie charts because I used a website and then I was like, these are pretty rubbish pie charts. But I just like to quick look at the numbers and then I'll make a few more points. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, but I did say this was unrehearsed and going to be organic, and this is a part of the organic nature of this episode. Is I'm doing stuff in a cuckoo order. Okay, so most Arabs are Muslim. Okay, most Arabs are Muslim. That's the pie chart right there. 95% of Muslims are Arab. Yeah? But most Muslims are not Arabs. What? Most Muslims are not Arabs. Most Arabs are Muslim, but most Muslims are not Arab. Now, what the hell does that mean? It means that most Muslims are located not in the Middle East, where most people are Arab. The most Muslims you'll find in Indonesia and India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. That's where the most Muslims are. So that's why most Muslims are not Arab, but most Arabs are Muslim, because most of the Arabs living in the Middle East are Muslim. Yes, some are Christian, some are Druze. There's a list of other things they can be, but most of them, like 95%, 95%, are Muslim. Okay, and then important to keep in mind that Iran is not Arab; it's Persian. Now, most of them are Muslim, but they're not ethnically Arab. They're Persian. And most people in Israel, I just mentioned Israel earlier, most people in Israel are Jewish. About 20% are Arabs, and then there's some other people, but mostly Jewish by about almost 3/4, and then about 20% Arab. Okay, so that's a quick look at the numbers, and my really rubbish pie charts. There's a mechanism I've detected in Western perceptions of the Arab world and the news and the commentary and how that part of the world gets handled by pundits, by intellectuals, by journalists, by commentators. There's a certain mechanism that prevails in the discourse, and that is as follows. Here's the 5 points. And this is really, really interesting. Talk about racist contempt. So, the mechanism is this. The Prophet Muhammad did or was, and then some nasty thing. Okay? So we insult the Prophet Muhammad. Then we move on to 2.2, or the second premise. Because the Prophet Muhammad was morally corrupt because of premise number 1, at its core, Islam is also corrupt. Neat. Premise number 3, because Islam is corrupt, so is the Arab Middle East. If at the core the religion is one, some old high school friend, and we're no longer friends, but we were friends in high school, and he reached out to me on Facebook, and he referred to Islam as an evil ideology, which I thought was really interesting. Islam's an evil ideology? If that was the case, I wouldn't have made it out of there alive, much alone multiple trips. If it was an evil ideology, I wouldn't have made it out of there I wouldn't. They'd have killed me in the first hour. Evil ideology. So, because Islam is corrupt, the Arab Middle East is corrupt. And then we move to the fourth premise. Because of the culture's depravity, the region is inherently unstable. So all the things we see on CNN and all the things we see on the news and the commentary and stuff, the place is a mess because the culture's a mess. And therefore, we lead to the grand conclusion. Because of premises 1, 2, 3, and 4, we arrive at the conclusion Western U.S. involvement in the region has been morally negligible. Now, ain't that something? So we can go there and rain death and destruction on them and murder innocent people and support the worst psychopaths in the region and to do our bidding as leaders. And all of that is morally negligible because the place is already a mess. If the place is already a mess, then it doesn't really matter what we do, does it? So this is the mechanism. That's what I call the mechanism. And yeah, you'll see this time and again. That's the thinking right there in 5 easy pieces. That's the title of a film. Jack Nicholson, 5 Easy Pieces. I've never seen it, much to my shame. Yeah, Jack Nicholson. Must have been in the 70s. So that's it. 4 premises leading up to a conclusion. Muhammad was a bad thing. Because Muhammad was a bad thing, Islam is a bad thing. Because Islam is a bad thing, the Arab Middle East is a bad thing. Because the culture is a bad thing, then the region is a mess. So what we do there doesn't matter. A very convenient argument to justify our immoral conduct in the region. Neat. So, I also want to talk about just a couple things that, one of the first premise about the Prophet Muhammad being, this, that, or the next thing. There's 3 points I'd like to make. And one is Sharia law. One is his marriage to Aisha. And that 72 virgins nonsense. Well, it's not 100% nonsense, but it's kind of used. The way it's used is the way it's wielded is nonsense. I'll get to that. So Sharia law. What's Sharia law? Well, when we think of Sharia law, we think of people's heads getting chopped off, and then there's this racist fear in Western Europe that the Muslims are going to move here and they're going to convert Europe to Sharia law. This is patent nonsense. Sharia law has to do with living an upright Muslim life. And it covers just about all aspects of Muslim life. And personal opinion, this is a personal opinion. I'm not a participant in this religion. I'm not insulting the religion. This is just a personal view that most of Sharia law, maybe not most, but a good chunk of it is boring. I just find it boring. It's not people getting their heads cut off with swords and crazy stuff like that. A lot of it is, for me, not particularly interesting. It has to do with contracts. It has to do with business practices. It has to do with wedding proceedings. It has to do with, stuff like that. I mean, I don't find that stuff very interesting. So, when you've been to a restaurant or you've been to a fast food joint, you'll see the term halal. That just means the food was prepared in accordance with Muslim principles. It's no different than going to a kosher deli. Are the Jews trying to take over New York and convert New York City to kosher? No. That's a ludicrous thought. And the Muslims are not trying to take over Europe. It's also a ludicrous thought. Sharia law has to do with living an upright life and living in accordance with Muslim principles. But it covers every aspect, almost every aspect of Muslim life. So, yeah, contracts? Business practices? Whatever. I don't find that particularly interesting. And to be worried about it is like tantamount to mental illness. Why would you be worried about how Muslims prepare contracts? The second one is his marriage to Aisha. The marriage was arranged. Their marriage was political. He was related to the person who was Aisha's, I can't remember, uncle or father. And then, the Prophet Muhammad was probably in his early 50s, about 53. Aisha was about 9 years old. So people in the West love to trot this out, that the Prophet Muhammad was a pedophile and, had this little girl in his bed. Not the case. If we attend to the scholarly record, which I have, we learn that Aisha had a very happy childhood, would operate eventually in the capacity of his wife. They were very much in love. She became a revered and very important figure and leader in Islam. She's held in very high esteem. When she was 9 years old, the Prophet Muhammad would play with her. It was like a father-daughter relationship, basically. He would play with toys. She had toys, and she would play. And historical accounts and even things she said support the fact that her childhood was a happy one, and she wasn't just locked in a house with this lecherous pervert. So that's nonsense. The Prophet Muhammad was not a pedophile. He wasn't, bringing young girls into his bed. It's just something that's racist that we use because it fits under the mechanism. But it's got nothing to do with the historical record, and it's got nothing to do with the scholarly record. And if anyone's interested, I would steer you toward the scholarly historical record. And then we get a very clear picture of how happy Aisha's childhood really was. Now for the 72 virgins. The Quran does mention what are called huris. Particular attention is paid to their eyes. They have large, dark eyes. There's a lot of descriptions about their eyes. So the assumption is that some terrorist is going to line his or her jacket, probably his jacket, with Semtex, and walk into a restaurant in West Jerusalem and blow the contents of the restaurant into the street. And then, voila, he gets 72 virgins in paradise. It's not how it works. The Quran takes a dim view of terrorism, does not condone the murdering of innocent people. This does not win you 72 virgins. The Houris are virgins, depending on the scholarly or scriptural sources. They can be male or female. The thing with the eyes again, that gets mentioned. They're only mentioned in the Quran a few times in a few pages. I think 4 maybe. I can't remember. Maybe 4 pages in the Quran. The Houris. Paradise is a sensual place. They recline on these couches and they just sort of keep you company in paradise. And you're surrounded by these beautiful women with big dark eyes. If you're a female, then you get dudes who are good looking and keep you company. You don't. But this whole idea of I'm going to blow up a pizzeria and then I get 72 prostitutes, and the number 72 is debatable too. It depends on the sources you're using, and the Quran does not say, okay, kill these infidels and then you get 72 prostitutes. That is complete fiction. Paradise is a like I said, a sensual place, and they talk about in the Quran, they recline on these on these couches, and they just kind of keep you company for all eternity. That's it. Yeah, you don't murder innocent people and then you get 72 prostitutes. That's not the way it works. So that's another way of sort of impugning the honor of Islam and insulting Islam and insulting the Arab world. But the 72 virgin nonsense, or Aisha, or Sharia law, But Westerners are always very quick to paint the modern Middle East as this place of just barbarism and violence and so on and so forth. I've been there. It's not. I've been treated very well, and I saw terrible things there. I don't even want to talk about it. I've seen terrible things in the Middle East. This one time, I saw an old woman. She was sweeping the steps. I saw another young couple out for an evening stroll. They were holding hands. I saw school kids on their way to school, young boys, about 8 years old, and one hit the other over the head with his book bag. They get the flu, they pay bills, they go to work. Exotic creatures, those Arabs. I know we can't relate. We don't pay bills or get the flu or go to work, but they do. It's such an exotic place. So I hope some of this made sense, and I hope it wasn't a totally disorganized mess. I know it's been a long time since I put out an episode. I had great fun working with Michael. He'll be back. We got 130 views on YouTube. So Michael pulls numbers. So Michael, I'm just cashing in. Everybody knows that. You know that. Everybody knows that. Because Michael pulls numbers, apparently. He'll be back. I told him, I'm going to have you back on the show because you pull numbers, dude. So he thought that was funny. So I'm going to have Michael back. We're going to talk about some other stuff. We're going to talk about probably Russian literature. I just thought it'd be fun to have an episode where we do like podcast stuff. He and I are just going to talk about stuff for like an hour and a half with no script, no plan, no nothing. We just yammer. So that I think that would be fun to do that as well. Next episode, what's the point? No matter what I say, you know it's going to be different. But chances are Michael will be involved. Well, I guess that's it, Harms Army. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I have. I don't want to say that. That sounds kind of like Fireside, like Channel 11 PBS kind of stuff. But I do hope you enjoyed the episode. I do. All right, Harms Army. That's it. I'll see you next time on The Inquiry.